Hi, everyone. Once again, we are doing another Champions in the Crisis interview. And today, my guest is Roy Murdough. And Roy is the program director of our Ithaca Homeless Services. And as some of you know, we took on homeless services in Ithaca, New York, about a year and a half ago. Roy, does it sound about right?
It's about right, yep. It was November 1st of 2018, so about a year and a half.
And the first season, so you've had two historic events back to back, because the first year, the first winter, you guys served more people than the shelter had ever served previously. I think the coldest night you were helping to coordinate and provide shelter for about 160 people, if I remember correctly.
One night in February of 2019, we actually had 183 people in shelter. So it was by far the busiest that as far as I know, the busiest the shelter has ever been.
And so then you figured you would top that by trying to operate homeless services in an emergency shelter and day center during a pandemic, which is incredible. But before I get into that, I can't help but notice your background. So you are based in Ithaca, New York. I'm guessing that is not Ithaca, New York behind you.
That is not Ithaca, New York. That is, I'm actually sitting in my office, but, and I'm not in the Adirondacks, but that is the, you can see right to my, to the right of my head there is Algonquin Peak, I believe. I'm not there right now. I'm in my office. So
it'd be a nice place
to be. Wonderful thing. So.
Yeah. It would be a nice place to be. It's one of my favorite places to have visited is the Adirondacks for sure. So,
yeah.
Well, Roy, tell me a little bit. I mean, how are you guys managing? Give me a sense of how many people you're serving and supporting, what kind of operations, and certainly how do you manage emergency shelter and day services? In the midst of social distancing, a pandemic, and COVID-19.
Well, we have had to change the entire way that we operate the shelter. About a month ago in New York State, when social distancing came about, a big part of our shelter is something that we call the Friendship Center, and it's a place where people who are either in shelter or just people in the community want to come if they need a place to get a cup of coffee or grab a bagel or watch a little TV or hang out, essentially, is a place that they could do that. Well, we no longer can do that. The Friendship Center is also a place where we provide lunches 3 days a week. Someone can come in and use the laundry if they want to use the laundry. So we provide lots of services. And in the new way of doing business, people obviously can't hang out in the shelter. So we've devised a way by which people come to the door one at a time, and whatever their need is, we will take care of it, whether they need to take a shower, whether they are hungry and need something to eat, whether they want some food out of our pantry, whether they need to, maybe they feel sick and they feel that, that they need to be tested. We have a protocol in place for that. So all of the needs are being met by all of our clientele. We're just doing it in a much different way and keeping social distancing in place. So it seems to be working out quite well, Alan.
That's incredible. And roughly how many people would you say are you providing shelter or coordinating shelter for on a given night? How many people might be stopping in for individual services out of the Friendship Center?
So last night we had 114 people in shelter. So, and wow. As you know, our shelter is very small. Yep. We actually only have a 20-bed shelter, which is actually less than that now because we used to double up people in rooms and we no longer do that. So our shelter now is only a 10-person shelter. And then the rest of the folks are in hotels around the community. So, and we've actually, since the COVID operation, or since COVID-19 has hit us and been upon us, the number of people in shelter has risen by, I guess, by 20 or 30%. We have more people in shelter now than we have had all winter. So, maybe. Well, we've done some outreach. We've gone out, and some people who may have not been housed, we've brought them in and given them a hotel room, all in the effort to sort of keep the population safe.
Wow, that's tremendous. And how are the residents and how are your guests doing? And how's the team doing? Because this has got to be tremendously different and stressful. And I imagine that there's a lot of conversations that you're having daily with your team just to keep spirits up and help them push through this and provide tremendous services to those that we're supporting during this time.
Right. So our clients, there, and you are familiar with homeless shelters in upstate New York and are familiar with the clientele that we deal with. And I must say they're not always the best rule followers in the world. So we've done actually, and the staff has done a tremendous job of just informing folks the importance of social distancing. We have signs up all over the place where we remind people on a continual basis to wash their hands, to stay apart, and that this is very important. And it's really a matter of life and death. And so our clients have, the new norm is it's starting to normalize a little bit. So people are getting used to all the new way of doing things and the way that the Friendship Center is run, and that's going quite well. Our staff is, I must say, they are on the front lines on a daily basis and just do an absolutely tremendous job. The care and the compassion and love, really, that they show for our clientele is just so apparent every day. And it's a little scary, I mean, we deal with a very vulnerable population, many of which, as I mentioned, aren't the best rule followers in the world. And so, everyone's a little bit worried about having the proper personal protective equipment, and we have all the right equipment, and everyone is very serious about that. So the changes have been, at first was difficult, but we're sort of, getting into the flow of things now, and the new norm is sort of kicking in, and people are beginning to feel a bit more comfortable with the way that we're doing things. And we're doing it obviously to keep not only our clientele safe, but our staff safe as well. And as time goes on, and with all the right personal equipment, personal protective equipment, I think things are going well.
Of course. I mean, it is challenging. I mean, as you mentioned, and I think as you were kind of inferring, some of the people that we support in shelter, have mental health issues. And so they may struggle with, and some of those are pretty severe, and they may struggle with kind of even understanding the concept of social distancing. And, it's a big change for everybody. I mean, I went to Trader Joe's yesterday and I had my mask on and I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing. And when I got to check out, I would normally help the person there bag, my groceries, but she's like, no, please step back behind the line, sir, and like behind that plastic glass. Yeah. So I think it's a big adjustment for everybody. And I definitely so appreciate your team and you and what you've been doing in the midst of this. You had a little bit of a scare when this started as well, right? I mean, you actually had to go and get tested for COVID. Can you briefly kind of give us an update on what that was like and how you're doing now?
I did. It was actually, it's been a while now. It's been about a month. And I had been traveling recently. And in fact, I had traveled to San Francisco, which at the time was a hot spot. And they had just closed down, I think they were the first to do the shelter in place thing. And then I had visited you in Washington a couple of times. So I had been on planes and traveling, and I had a cold. And it felt like a cold, and I thought it was a cold. So I called my doctor, actually, just to say, I have an appointment coming up. When is it? And they started asking me some questions, and they said, well, I think maybe you should get tested. And so just days before, here in Ithaca, New York, they had opened a drive-through testing site, and I went and got tested. And it was, I had to stay at home, quarantined, sort of locked myself in my bedroom and couldn't go near my family, and just stayed there and continued to do my thing and work. And I really thought it was a cold, and I'm glad to find out that that's really all it was a cold. But it was a little scary at first.
Yeah.
This is, I think we're all discovering that this is not an illness that we want to take lightly. So.
Uh, Absolutely. And I remember talking to you when you found out that you were going to go get tested, and then, the check-in calls we do every morning when you were sharing about, being quarantined in your room, and how much of a relief it was when you found out that your test was negative, and how big a deal it was to actually be able to leave your bedroom and venture out and maybe the living room. So, so we're very grateful that you are healthy, and incredibly happy, grateful for your team. Really quick, just as we close out, how are you and your wife, your family, how are you guys coping at home? What have you taken to do during this time?
Well, I'm at home. I have I have two stepchildren. One is home from college, and one is a senior in high school, and he's missing all of the things that seniors get to do in high school. But they're at home, and we're all home together. And it's been interesting, and it's been fun. I personally, and my wife and I like to walk, and I live in the country, so I get to go and do that on a regular basis. I'm a very avid bird watcher, and so that's something. It's sort of like my meditation. It's just something that I enjoy doing. It takes my mind off of other things, and this is a good time of year to be bird watching, and migration's happening. So I get out and I walk. I have a nice big yard and a garden. I've started that earlier than I ever have, I might say. So, but things are going well. Things are going well.
Cool. No, I'm glad to hear that. My wife is a huge bird watcher. So right now she is glued to kind of the forest outside and being able to see what's flying around. And we're kind of hoping to see a Baltimore Oriole or two in the next month or so. So we'll see if that happens. But hey, Roy, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for what you're doing with the shelter and keeping those individuals safe and healthy, and what you're doing with your team. And in the midst of this crisis, you guys are truly champions for making sure that people still have the needs met that they have, whether that's physical shelter and a safe place to stay, whether that's food and meals, whether that's someone to talk to, frankly, because this is such a time of isolation, and still talk to someone while maintaining social distance in your service. So hang in there, keep at it. We're going to get through this. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your story and what's going on in Ithaca.